look at one of the parts of this story that we're commemorating the 151st anniversary of, that being the Battle of the Stones River, which would prove ultimately to be one of the most important battles and Union victories of the American Civil War. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a short walk behind the visitor center here and across the road to our tour stop number 4 and look at one particular part of the story of the Battle of Stones River with the idea of trying to see it from multiple viewpoints or perspectives. Because, you know, when you talk about, well, any event in history, but particularly when you're talking about a battle, there are at least two sides to the story, right? But in fact, if you really think about it, it's far more than two, isn't it? Because there's 81,000 soldiers that are fighting in this battle, which means how many points of view could we possibly look at if we're looking at this story? 81,000. Now, this particular story, we're going to talk about 3 units. A group of Texans in Ector's brigade that will be fighting in the area that we're going to be going to first. And the men that they'll be facing off against, the men of the Pioneer Brigade and the Chicago Board of Trade Battery on the Union side. So you've got one side that coming in is experienced and really almost supremely confident as they move into this fight, while the other is kind of nervous and not sure how this thing is going to go. And by the time it's over, it's completely switched from one side to the other. Now you've got one that's demoralized and wondering how things are going to work out, and the other is feeling pretty darn good about their prospects moving forward. We're going to go down into that field, and we're going to start with the Confederate view of this story and Ector's Texans. Okay? So join me. The regiments in this unit are actually what we call dismounted cavalry. And they're pretty ticked off about that, I gotta say. They joined up in the Confederate Army back in Texas to be cavalrymen. I mean, of course, from Texas, you want to be on a horse, right? And they got their horses, they trained as cavalry, but when they were called to move across the Mississippi River to join what we know today here on this battlefield as the Army of Tennessee, there was not enough transportation to move the men and the horses across the river. So an officer said, well, y'all just get on the boat, we'll send your horses later. Here it is a year and a half after that moment, and they're still on the ground fighting like infantry. In fact, they will serve out the entire war as infantry. And so anytime they get a chance to take out their frustrations on the Yankees, they do so.
Aim! Oh! Rear rank! Aim! Oh!
And these guys are very experienced soldiers. They've been at the battles of Shiloh and Perryville. They've been campaigning for a good long while now. So they've seen the elephant, as the soldiers say, when they see their first battle, and then some. They know if they keep the momentum going, ultimately they will reach the Nashville Pike, which is the road just on the other side of the visitor center, and then they will have a war-changing victory for the Confederacies here as they essentially cut off and annihilate the Army of the Cumberland. P.R. Jones of the 10th Texas Cavalry says, the cedars were very dense, making it difficult to keep alignment while going through to the open ground on the other side. And as the men came out of those fields and began to move forward to engage the enemy, they almost immediately came under fire. As Lieutenant J.T. Tunnell of the 14th Texas Cavalry Dismounted wrote, the artillery opened up and cut the timber off over our heads, and it seemed that the heavens and the earth were coming together. And even though they came under heavy fire, Ector and his boys, they were used to this kind of stuff. They've been in it before. Men die in battle. They have to face cannons and musketry to accomplish their goal. They begin to pitch in and try to do their work. What they're doing now is firing by fire, which just runs down the line with your file partners, front and rear, firing together like a wave in a football stadium, and in a much longer line like Ector's Texans with almost 2,000 men would have, that would be almost a continuous fire as it keeps rippling down the line until they get the command to cease firing. They would be firing at the rate of about 2 to 3 shots a minute. The Texans did give it their all. They pushed out across this field several times trying to break the Yankee line in front, but ultimately each time they were beaten back by the concentrated infantry and artillery fire. Lieutenant J.T. Tunnell, the 14th Texas, says, "Their front line of battle seemed to take fresh courage and began to advance upon us. We, having only one line and the men badly scattered, a retreat was our only salvation from death or capture." Meanwhile, P.R. Jones, when he finally gets back to the woods, says, "Those of us who got back to an opening were greatly demoralized." Littleton Fowler, who had taken refuge among the cedars behind some rocks, said that the cannonading was so terrific he could have caught birds that were so benumbed they could not fly. And so the Texans, so supremely confident at 6 o'clock in the morning, as they drove the Yankees over miles and miles, inflicting thousands of casualties, seeming never going to stop until they had reached their objective, finally reached something that wouldn't move, hit them hard enough to actually turn them into the ones that were doubting their prospects of victory here on this battlefield.
This has been a History Break, brought to you by City TV and the Stones River National Battlefield.